Okay, well, confirm that Scott has started the recording, and then we can get started talking about this week's topic, which is team culture. I don't remember if we had outlined any like initial questions that people had, but anybody have anything in particular, burning questions about team culture, forming it or working on it?
Yeah, so and Finn can probably also talk about too. We got other people from 3926 here today. But our team, since the COVID pandemic, and especially since the end of last season, we've been, trying to build up culture, and we're kind of now at like the halfway point where we have kind of a culture established, but we're also looking on, how to continue that culture that we've established and continue to grow it, I guess.
Yeah, and Ian, when you say like team culture, do you mean like forming like your team's like core values, or just like the structures of your meetings, or like peer relationships? Like what are you looking to focus on?
I guess team culture as a whole, it's something very nebulous, right? Because I've talked about it before, but our team kind of has been moving more towards a year-round program as opposed to one where it's you come in during the build season, you build the robot, and then and we're trying to focus more on being a prominent aspect of our community, and I guess a team culture more that emphasizes more than just being there to build robots for 6 weeks of a year.
Yeah, I definitely get that, and I feel like on KnightKrawler sometimes it differs between like the sub teams. Like I was on controls before I was team captain, and so I feel like with controls you're kind of always just like working on these little projects, and so like within the sub team it's very much like continual. But then for build, I think before turtle test it was probably even harder because there wasn't like a defined purpose for people to do things before like the actual season, and so I think there was a lot of, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but like almost like a lack of motivation or ambition to do things before build season.
Do any of your teams do things during the summer for the community, or can you extrapolate on that kind of culture for your team?
I know one of the things that we started to do last summer was we did a summer camp for the first time. I know, a lot of teams talk about their summer camps. I know one of the most frequently talked about things within the captain's circles is, starting summer camps, maintaining summer camps. And so I definitely think that's, one of the most prominent ways, especially if you're doing it through your school, because then you're probably reaching out to middle schoolers or elementary schoolers who might be like, oh, now I want to join robotics when I'm, in high school.
Yeah, I think for us, on 2052, we usually have summer projects that people come in and work on. So I know last year, it's mostly optional meetings once or twice a week, and students can come in and like work on the t-shirt cannon or fix up like an older robot. I know it's something that we've been interested in. We do a couple of the like community parades. So we do like the New Brighton Parade, Mount View Parade. We go to the State Fair, and we're looking into like summer camps and stuff, because I don't know if that's something that we've done much in the past, except for that we also have some of our returning students go to like a tech conference. It's called That Conference. And we run the youth section of that conference for like 4 days. So that's a pretty big undertaking. But doing a summer camp like on our own isn't something that we've really done, at least not when I'm on the team. And so we're kind of looking into like how some other teams have done that.
Good. So as Talon, we've run summer camps pretty much forever. And it's pretty much, it's totally student run. They decide exactly what they want to teach and organize. In fact, we're already starting on that now, trying to do that planning. In fact, this year, I think we're actually going to run 2 summer camps, and they're tied in with the school system. The school runs week-long summer camps, and we piggyback with the building and organization with that. Everything else is totally organized by the students as to what they wish to do and run it. I think lately we're running pretty much 2nd through 4th graders through it.
Eric, I really like your question. I think, yeah, I know I could talk a lot about our summer camps, and I don't want to distract too much from that conversation, so keep things open. Again, like I really love talking about summer camps, but Lexi, I want to return to, you brought up sub teams in your first comment, and I wanted to talk about that for a little bit, because I know on the Mythic we have pretty rigid sub-team structure, and I think I really like that structure because it allows a lot of our students to be able to specialize and hone in on the skills that they want to specialize in. But from a team culture standpoint, we have some issues with the inter-sub-team cohesion, and that's usually something that improves over the season as, you know, we head into competition season, and, you know, our students are with each other a little bit more often. They can recognize, you know, the overall team goals. We've had a lot of success blending sub teams, especially like as we go to Worlds. But a goal that I have for our team is to be able to better improve that, and you know, have our team as a whole be able to mix and have our students be able to you know, work and talk with and recognize each other's value between sub teams a lot more. And so I'm wondering, for teams that have a similar structure, or just people that have thoughts on that, you know, how do you better improve the cohesion of the team as a whole?
Well, I think that's a great idea, is that we have very much marketing and many sub-teams that are very structured, but during the summer and off season, we try to get everybody trained on all the equipment, no matter what where you're planning to be. Maybe you're not going to be on the build, but we like to see 100% of our students be trained on all the power tools and have their hands on everything. And I think that's part of it. The other thing is we try and get our engineering into marketing. We have certain requirements to go to tournaments and get subsidized, that you actually, even if you're on an engineering group, you need to put in so many hours of marketing too. And that way people or our students cross over, and it's almost required that you have to get introduced to each other and be on different sub teams, even if during build season you might not be on them.
I really like the idea of like having projects where students from other sub teams have to work together. I think that's a good idea. I know for us, one of the major things was, so currently we have dedicated like a shop closet, and then, you know, in after school hours, we're allowed to use the adjacent gymnastics gym, which is large enough to have all of our team in one space, which is awesome, because the problem was when we didn't have that, we had a separate smaller closet that we would put all of our things in, and then every sub team would be in a different classroom. So people literally wouldn't see each other, which I think made those divisions much worse. Something we also have is we have, because we don't have a designated PR or media sub-team right now, we have what we call like task force media, which is basically after COVID, and then after last year, we did not have enough students. We had basically one student who was like, I solely want to do PR. And that's improved a little bit. But we also had some students last year who were like, well, I'm on controls, but I really, really love, making videos. And so we were like, well, we can kind of use this multidisciplinary inclination that students have to like essentially create these like task forces where it's not an official sub-team. So you can be like on controls and media or on build and media. And I think, then you have a bunch of students who, otherwise are on different sub-teams, but they meet together to do these things and kind of work on those projects. And so right now, the only major one we have like that is media. There might be a fundraising one next year as well. But I like the idea of expanding that because I think the best way to have students get to know each other is to have them work on projects together. Like for all the names that we do.
Do other teams have regular team meetings that you have everybody show up at? And then for our team meetings, part of it is each team, sub-team, talking about what they've accomplished that week. But the second half is actually team builders. So we play games, just mix up randomly and play games, word games, whatever games together. There's always somebody comes up with some kind of game, and then you have to work with each other just on a random basis. That way everybody gets to know each other. The other thing is we have other team builder events. Like a couple of weeks ago, we had ice skating, everybody invited, or we have team meeting picnics out in the park during the summer. So we try and have everybody pretty well knows each other, and on an informal basis, as well as during the actual build basis that you're then set on your sub-team.
Going back to your previous question, we kind of rely on our hub or our conference in our case to do some of those collaborative things over the summer. We have a programming camp that we run with a local university, a 2-day programming camp. And then we do a lot of off-season events too, as many as we can get into over the summer. Just trying to keep the team cohesion together. But beyond that, that's kind of where we start falling flat. But
Yeah.
Relying on that group, so it's not just all your team doing stuff, seems to be beneficial. Spread out that workload a little bit on organizing and coordinating those things.
Yeah, something our team noticed last year was that, especially between sub-teams, the area in which, like how your shop or your lab or wherever you work is, your workspace is arranged can have a really big impact on team cohesion and culture. So I think like last year, there was like this huge storage wall that basically split right down the middle of our workspace. And then it kind of informally split the, build design side from the code electronic side. And then we had our operations sub-team, work in a classroom. And that definitely, you could feel, divides between those three groups on the team. And so this year, we kind of got rid of that and we made more of like an open area space where all of the sub teams were working in the same-ish area. And that seems to have helped a lot, at least with the build code divide, because basically we now have like 2 Zoom monitors, lining across the walls of our one of the walls of our workspace, and that allows for people are seeing what's going on, whether it be CAD or code on those screens, and it's definitely helped. I think we still have a bit of a ways to go, especially with integrating our operations sub-team to our team, though, because something that seems really difficult, and from talking to other teams too, is that a lot of times it feels like the operations sub-team is almost treated as it's part of a completely different team, even though that's absolutely not the case.
I just had a question on our structure at Talon at Team 2022. We don't have I'm just trying to find the equivalent of what an operations team is. Do you want to define what that would be? It's
basically businessy marketing, PR, non-robot stuff, essentially.
Okay.
I think that's how you're using it, Ian. That's how we use it on our team.
Yeah, we're using it the way that No Mythic defined it, because we felt that it better reflected our team.
Okay, thank you.
I know, on No Mythic, we eat dinners together on our Tuesdays and Thursday practices. And part of eating dinners together is you get a lot of team cohesion. We, especially on Tuesday nights, we do things called unicorn families, where we put basically a random group of students and mentors together. And have
definitely not random, Dominic. I spent a lot of time putting those groups together, but yes.
But they're a good mix of students and mentors. And they kind of talk about full team discussions, whether that be competitions and feelings around competitions or team values and whatnot. And that can really help, especially since then you really get to know a bunch of other people on different sub teams. And then much like Talon, we have closing meetings at our meetings, and Phoebe can talk a little bit more about that. Phoebe is always leads ours and is very awesome at that.
Yeah, I guess. Thank you, Dominic. We do closing meetings every night, which was interesting to hear that you do them weekly, because I wonder how that potentially gives you more time to do more. Anyways, I don't know, hearing about team building activities, because we try to keep them short since we're doing them every practice. I don't know. But we do just, what are they, 15 minutes at the end of every meeting, where every sub team gives an update on what they accomplished during the day. We try to encourage people to get specific about what has actually been accomplished. We've had a lot of trouble with people being I riveted something, and we're what did you rivet? How did it help us move forwards? But generally the updates are nice to help people understand what's going on within the whole team. And then we do announcements, but I still feel like we could be using those meetings more to help improve cohesion. So I'm really intrigued by the idea of doing team building activities during something like that.
Our team meetings are regularly a Tuesday, a full hour. And then, as I said, then everybody knows to come then at that specific time. So we get a lot of members there. And it's run by our captains. And then, I don't know, what do we have, 8 or 10 sub-teams? Paul, I'm not sure, I keep forgetting. Broken up into half are marketing and half's engineering. And then each lead then gives a subset of, a description of what they did that week. And then after that's complete, we go over any other things coming up, planning for tournaments or etc. And then, as I said, we can end up with a team builder to finish up the hour.
Yeah, we usually use our team meetings as kind of a launch point to gather everyone together and organize the team. And then another thing is that after the meeting's done, usually just having everyone in the same space makes it really easy for people to come around and coordinate with each other individually. And I think that really helps us stay together.
The other fortunate thing is that we have a lot of overlap between students that do both marketing and engineering. And that's particular to the students themselves, but we do have a lot of overlap doing both, and that adds a lot of cohesion. The other thing is, a lot of these outreach events, we need to get a robot going along with a marketing team. So we have to make sure everything's fixed, we have usually a good demo robot that's nice around kids, meaning I don't know, it's from several years ago, maybe 2019, one that throws softballs rather than, the last couple of years have not been very kid-friendly, but we keep that one running. But by having the engineering kids having to get that up and ready and make sure it's ready to go, and they also attend the outreach events with the marketing teams. So there is good overlap just working together on those things.
I hear a lot about the fun activities or team building activities that a lot of teams do, and I always I want our team to do more, but I know we struggle just because we devote almost all of our practices to sub teams working on tasks and working towards specific goals, and we find that a lot of times it is usually better for us to do team building activities outside of practice, and especially they're really useful when they're outside of the school building or outside of the workspace, especially for our students that go to Great River School, where our team practices that they're not in their school building, they're not in this environment that is usually used to build work. But we have struggled to find other spaces to do team building activities, and we have sent out invitations to we've made it clear to the team that you can if you have an idea for a team building activity, you can invite people to do something outside of practice, but it's usually not team organized. And I think a problem that we run into there is that a lot of students don't have access to spaces that could be used for larger team building activities. We have 32 students on our team, and 31 students on our team, and it's hard for all of those students to fit in one space. I know I certainly could not invite all of our team to come to my house, and so I'm wondering how do other teams do team building activities outside of practices? Are there specific spaces that you find more accessible than others? Are they team organized or student organized?
I know this year our team did a team retreat within our school, and we are a little, at least the people organizing it. Originally, we were planning to have it off-site, but then eventually we decided to just do it within the site of our school building, just because it was easier logistically. And so we found that doing, team building days within the school can still be, really valuable. I think we ended it with a walk to an ice cream place nearby, which was, a lot of fun, because, just walking as a team, you just talk and get a lot, closer to each other, which seemed to be, really fun. And we just played games, did team bonding. We made groups of people that might not usually hang out together and, put those people in groups. And it definitely helped our team cohesiveness this year, I think. Just having everyone know each other from the get-go, especially for new students who a lot of times, they come pretty afraid. We thought that having a team retreat kind of almost helped, make it so they now, were friends with more experienced people who could help guide them.
Do the teams, does any team out there try to guide a team culture in a certain way? And for us, I'm thinking about KnightKrawler uses core values or do you have a mission statement or anything that you use to sort of guide the culture that you want the team to take? It sounds like a lot of the great cultures happen organically, and I agree with that. But then there's also that sense of we want to try to guide this culture, and here are the ways that we're going to do it. I know that I see that Yoji's on the call. Yoji years ago helped us with a core values thing, and that's how we got started with core values. And I'm just curious if anyone else is doing anything to sort of guide their culture.
Scott, yeah, you're right. 1816 spends a lot of time using core values to kind of guide team culture. It started with developing core values, and when did we do that? 2017, I think it was. 2017 or 2018. And it was really after a pretty difficult championship event in 2015. So for us, it's really a team retreat every fall. That's been happening for many, many years. And we spend most of the time at that retreat kind of discussing the team's core values, having different activities focused on that. A lot of communication exercises that are being developed by other mentors on our team. So a lot of kind of team building through that. And then sort of regular kind of discussions that are kind of focused on team activities and events that occur, and wrapping that around kind of team values, core values. I think there are other teams that actually probably do this even better than we do. I would say 2177, the Robettes, do a really fantastic job with their core values and kind of making sure that they guide team decision making and team decisions. When the whole VEX issue came up this year, the Robettes were really kind of leaders and kind of figuring out how to use their core values to determine the direction they wanted to take in response to those events. And the other team that does really a lot is 5690 ESCO, Sub-Zero Robotics. They use their core values in almost every regular activity that they have. So when they come back from an event, they do a debrief, and it's all focused on kind of revolving around their core values. They apparently have regular daily meetings, and one of their kind of check-in kind of things that they do is, again, to kind of talk about core values and how that's guiding the work that they're doing. So there's a lot of good work going on, and lots of different teams kind of focused on that.
I guess that might be a good question, is what is the best way to use core values? Because our team did the core values workshop in the fall of 2021. That's how time works. Where that was kind of the beginning of our journey, I guess, to redesign and change our team's culture. And it definitely helped guide that. But I know for our team, we don't use them as much as I'd personally like to. Like, we have them, and it's, because we kind of chose them based on, in some ways, things that we were already doing well. And it's like, I know that, like the Robettes, we used them to decide to move away entirely from the VEX ecosystem this fall. But then, figuring out, besides tough decisions, I know come build season, how do teams that use core values use, in some ways, those core values to, determine design decisions or decisions that guide the build season?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because I feel like to a certain extent, like when it comes to going to competition for our team, students can kind of like understand where we use our core values. And so like when we're outward facing, I think they come into play a lot more. And also as part of our leadership process, anybody who's applying for leadership, there is like a feedback form that goes out to everybody else on the team. And essentially all candidates, like their peers, grade them on our core values, and they have the opportunity to, provide any feedback, which I think is really good, and that contributes to having like team leadership who is on the same page with our core values. But I hadn't really thought about it in terms of like design decisions. I think that's a really interesting way to approach that. And then just on the day-to-day, yeah, I don't know. That's something that I think about with like, how can we, you know, do our core values fulfill what we want students to be like working on and like interacting within the team, or, you know, do they sometimes serve more like externally, you know, outward facing?
I want to, before we move on from KnightKrawler, I want to hop on what Lexi said. As a mentor who had to evaluate captain candidates for a number of years, 2 years ago, I think, is when we introduced this idea of soliciting student feedback using core values, and things got so much better, and the quality of feedback went way, way, way up. When we used to say, hey, if you have any positive or things that are of concern with any of our captain candidates, please feel free to email one of the mentors or pull them aside and talk to them. And that didn't get us very good results. But when we started sending out a survey saying, please rate this person on 1 to 5 on each of our core values, and if you have any comments, please include them, we got such good input, not just positive, but also the things that are sort of concerning as well. And it also helped to reinforce some of the things the mentors were seeing throughout the season. So it was great to get anecdotal, awesome feedback on people that showed great dedication or were being unflappable or good GP and all the other things that are part of our core values. But what was also interesting is when other students would say, you know, I don't feel like this person is using our core value of dedication very well, because they're often a distraction at meetings, and they're not being dedicated to tasks being done and hurting productivity. You know, and then there were some GP things that we found out about through this survey that we didn't even know about. And so it really helped us get better feedback on our captain candidates and how good of a fit they were, like Lexi had said, by using our core values. We, you know, nobody likes to select a captain and then have a whole bunch of complaints from parents saying, why would you make so-and-so a captain when they've done this, this, and this, and this, and the mentors don't know anything about those things that happen outside of the meetings. So I really like that.
Can I ask, Scott, when was your survey done? Was that previous to choosing your captains?
Yes. So everyone who applies to be a captain on the team, that's sort of public information that so-and-so is applying to be a captain. It's not really as much of a secret because we also have those people shadow the captains, so that they can kind of a day in the life where they shadow them at competition, they shadow them at meetings, they stay for our mentor captain leadership meeting at the end of one of our meetings once a week. So it's not really a secret who's applying for captains. And then we do captain interviews in person, but then we also send out the survey the week before we do interviews saying, hey, if you'd like to give us feedback on the captains and how they represent KnightKrawler core values, please fill out this survey. So when we select captains, we tell our students that your application is based on what you did this past year. So, you know, were you there? Did you do a good job? Did you practice, you know, leadership as a member of the team? What did your peers have to say about you in this survey? And how did you do in your interview? And the interview was a lot of, you know, what can we do better? What do you think works well? What do we need to build on? You know, it's the interview is more about the student having opportunity to share their vision of where they want to take their team or their sub team. And that's, so the interview is kind of like, what do you want to do with this team if you're captain? So those three things, it's kind of our observations throughout the year, what students had to say, and then your interview process.
Yeah, and one final thing. I think in terms of having the feedback, you know, before selecting captains, I think so in the way that, you know, like, you know, students model their behavior after mentor behavior, but I think like outside of, you know, when mentors aren't around or you're at competition, like so much of that comes down, or even just like attitude day to day, comes down to like students, what their captains and what their leaders are doing. And so like when I was a student on the team, I think it was definitely how your sub team captain, what kind of attitude they had about, you know, a problem, or, you know, just like how the season was going or something. That definitely was something that like you picked up on. And so I think sometimes when we're trying to think about like using our core values or changing how our team culture works, like being very conscious of the fact that we're modeling behavior. And like, I know that's something that sometimes I'll catch myself and be like, oh, I'm being a little negative about this. And like, it'll be better for the freshmen around me if I like can be more positive and look at this as an opportunity, because I've been through it. And so I know like, you know, I'm maybe complaining a little bit because I know it's going to be okay. But, you know, for other people, like they can rest assured in the fact that like we can solve this problem and stuff like that. So. But yeah, so the original question was how teams guide their culture outside of like what is just built in between like student peer relationships. So circle back to that if anybody else has things they want to add.
Lexi brings up a really good point too about modeling behavior. We started this sort of tongue-in-cheek, jokey, fun way to encourage people to remember that, hey, you need to model our core values. And whenever someone says something, and usually it's kind of them half joking or stuff, that we really don't want to model as a team, we remind everyone that captain's interviews started last week. So the idea that the mentors who are evaluating captain candidates are paying attention now. So you should be cognizant of the fact that captain interviews have already begun. And I think that's also been, it's a very lighthearted way to remind everyone, oh yeah, we need to model like we want to be leaders. And I think that's another thing that's been a nice sort of soft reminder throughout the year this year for people to model a culture that we want.
So how do most teams choose or vote for their captains? Who does it? How do you mix between students and mentors, or what style does different teams do?
I can speak to our process. It was really interesting hearing yours. But yeah, so we do it through a series of long meetings, which is very no mythic style, but potentially a little bit intense. So our first meeting is the nominations meeting. And everybody knows ahead of time that we're going to nominate captains. And then we have like everybody sits down. Hopefully it's nice weather and we're outside. But everybody sits down and we go around the entire circle, and anybody can nominate anybody else or themselves for any of our captain positions. But they can't renominate somebody who's already been nominated for that role. But they do, like our current captains need to be renominated, for example. Like you don't just automatically get the role again. And then so we go all the way around. People can pass if they don't have anyone. And then we take any other additional ones. People can say why they're nominating if they want to. And then we used to have people accept or decline in the moment. And I said that I thought we should have that changed to be something that happened after the fact. Because when I was in the spring of my 9th grade year, I was like expecting to be nominated for ops captain. Then I was also nominated for team captain and design captain. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And I declined both of them, which I think was the right move. But I felt like it would have been nice to have more time to think about it. And so anyways, so after nominations, we record all of the nominations. We also let people nominate in an online form afterwards, especially that part is especially in case people want to nominate themselves. They don't feel comfortable doing so in the meeting. But also if people missed it, whatever. Anyway, we tell everybody who's been nominated, like, hey, you've been nominated for these positions. Do you want to accept or decline? And then if they accept their nomination, Anybody who accepts a nomination has to write out answers to a series of questions that we have, which is kind of similar to that interview process, I guess. So questions about like, what have you contributed on the team in this past year? What are you interested in doing as captain? How would you help your team in a hard moment? I don't know what the questions are, but they're questions we've developed over time. And each candidate writes out answers to all those questions. And then we have our second meeting. In our second meeting, we go through every nominee for every position, and they share their answers to all of the questions. And then after they share their answers to all of the questions, we give everyone like the opportunity to ask questions and share feedback. Actually, before this, we have to have a feedback presentation about how to give kind and respectful feedback. Then we have this meeting. Then people will ask them questions about like, hey, I know that you also do theater. How are you going to manage theater with like captainship or whatever their questions are, as well as giving feedback about like, I think you'd be really good at this, or I have some concerns about this. And then we also give a chance for feedback after that. So that's the second meeting. The third meeting is only mentors and graduating captains. And graduating captains and mentors sit down with obviously all of their observations from the past year, as well as all of the written up answers and everything that they heard during that meeting. And then they spend another couple of hours, presumably. I've never been to one such meeting, but I will be this year, deciding who the next year's captain's team is going to be. So that's our process. We had a new mentor who was around for it last year, and after we went through the whole hearing people's responses and giving feedback and asking questions for everyone, he was like, oh my God, like, how do you do this? Why do you spend so much time on this? So I think it's a little maybe unique that we have that like really long meeting, but I like it personally.
I think it's interesting that you have graduating captains meet with mentors. Do you know like why that started?
I would have to guess that it's because graduating captains tend to have a lot of valuable feedback. So the theory of not like, you don't have the captains involved in the decision-making process. One, because we don't like really want it to be like it's a student decision. Mm-hmm. And like we want it to come from the mentors, especially if people are going to have hard feelings about like whatever role they got. And also because, like I said before, all of our current captains like have to be renominated. So it's like also deciding about them. But there's also an understanding that student captains are going to have a lot of valuable insight about other students. And so I think the idea is kind of like once those students are graduating, they're not making decisions about students in their own grade. Like any calls are going to be about students who are like in lower grades at that point, and they're leaving the team. And so they're able to provide that insight, and it's sort of a marking of like, you're graduating, you're becoming an alum. And so it's more okay to have you be part of the conversation. I think, I don't know. That's just how we do it. But yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about how their teams evaluate and select leaders? Otherwise, I have another question.
Well, Talon is structured, I think, a little differently than some other teams. We have 4 captains, and 2 are engineering and 2 are marketing. Then under them, we have, each has 5 sub-teams, I believe and those each have a sub-team lead. The captains cannot be a sub-team lead. So they have to be, not that they can't work on those teams and help out, but they can't have both positions. Our captains for the next year, they all have to have had 1 year being on the team, and they must be a sophomore or a junior. Every captain is self-nominated. Then we have a set of questions that they need to fill out an application, and they also have to create a video. Then after that, a team of mentors interviews each one individually. And then from that information, this will sketchy, at a certain date, we have a team meeting and voting for the captains. Two of the captains get selected by the team, and two of the captains get selected by the mentors, with the mentors overall having the final say. So I guess it might sound a little complicated, but that's basically how our team has been working over the years.
Eric, what's in the video? Is this like a campaign video, or is this a video in response to a specific set of questions?
No, it is a sort of talk about yourself and why you should be a captain. So I'm not sure if we still do it. I know we had to do that during COVID, obviously. I think we're still requesting that kids.
Yes, we are still doing the video. I'm applying for captain this year for Talon, and I have not made mine yet, but it is in the near future.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So I say it might have a little bit more to do with our team structure too. And each we have overriding mentors for the team that they lead the team, head mentors, and then each of our 10, Paul, it is 10, isn't it? Sub-teams each have their own lead mentor for them. So fortunately, we have a lot of support from our mentors to be able to maintain this.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Eric. My question related to alumni and how teams incorporate alumni like into their network, or on KnightKrawler we have a rule that alumni cannot come back to mentor the team until usually it's 4 years, but it's until the last person that they knew on the team graduates. But we've also had interest recently from recent graduates who are like, I just really want to come back and work with the team on things, like not necessarily to mentor, but like in the summer come back and work on things. And so we've been kind of navigating that, and like, where do we draw the line on like, you can come back, but you can't build the robot. So maybe like teaching other students. I don't know. I would be interested to see how other teams, interact with their alumni and like use them as a resource, but also, like draw boundaries where needed.
We as Talon, it's interesting you have 4 years. We have 1 year, but they have to come back as a mentor. They can't just show up, and they have to dedicate themselves to actually being a mentor for the team if they come back. They can't just come in and start playing around and working on it. So that it ends up quite a bit more structured.
We have a similar rule, at least in theory. We made an exception last year, but in theory, we also don't have alums come back before it's the same thing you said, but we haven't really had a lot of like what you're talking about, which is interesting. We had one student ask us like, hey, can I mentor the team when it was within that window, and also we didn't need a mentor for the thing he wanted to mentor, and we were like, have you considered maybe you could go mentor this other team? And he did, and he's now very happy there. That's my best like relevant anecdote. I feel like we almost go the opposite direction. It's like we actually haven't done that great of a job of keeping track of our alums over the years, and we would like to do a better job of like how to keep some sort of alum network so that we can keep updating people if they want to be updated, and like have the ability to reach out and be like, hey, like, do you want to come see us at competition, whatever, like, which I think part of that is involved in just literally collecting non-school contact info when people leave. But I also don't know if there's other stuff that people do in that realm.
This discussion of alumni is coming up for KnightKrawler. In the last 2 years, we've had 4 alumni return as mentors. They either returned in their one returned in their as their 4th year. So it had been 3 years they'd been away. So they returned in their 4th year. Everyone else was gone off the team, and then 2 returned in their 3 returned in their 5th year. So they had graduated from college, and now they were still in the area. And they've been fantastic mentors. In fact, I honestly am not sure we could have survived last year and this year without their help, because some of our mentors are having kids, and babies take up time, and they haven't been able to be at the meetings nearly as much. And so having these young mentors back has been really, really helpful. And we sort of want to maintain that pipeline of getting, as soon as people are eligible, get them back in the team, because it's worked out so well for us. But it isn't just students who are alumni to KnightKrawler. We recently had someone who is a senior at a high school right now for a team. I think he was from Illinois. Write us and ask us if he could mentor next year, because he was attending the University of Minnesota. And we discussed it, and we're like, you know what, this just doesn't seem comfortable here. We have this rule for our own students, and even though this person doesn't have any existing relationships, as far as we know, with current students on the team, we just feel like there needed to be sort of that separation too, from student to mentor. And it's not really appropriate that a mentor go hang out at a student's house and play Xbox, and being just 1 year removed, kind of that separation just didn't naturally feel like it was there. So we've extended that rule for the most part, and we can make exceptions, but it's not a rule. It's a guideline. We've made a guideline of, it doesn't matter if you're on KnightKrawler or not. We feel like that separation of being away is valuable and important. And we may change our mind on that down the road, but that's where we sit right now.
Sort of related to alumni, and sort of bouncing off of Phoebe's question, of just generally, how do you handle alumni communication, and in what cases do you contact alumni? I am really interested in Phoebe's question of how do you get a hold of alumni's contacts. I know I just sent out an email to the alumni that we had contacts up, and half of them were like school emails. But how do you get establish connections or contacts with those alumni, and in what cases do you communicate with them? Do you send out like a monthly alumni newsletter? Do you like set up specific like alumni communication networks? How do you handle that? I know we have communicated with alumni a lot, like when we have like a fundraising push, and we just have noticed that like we feel a little bit less comfortable only communicating with them when we we have a fundraising push and we want them to donate. And so we want to establish a more of an alumni connection to build that community a little bit better and incorporate that more into, let them know more what the team's up to.
What's interesting on our team is a lot of the mentors, their parents were mentors when they were on the team, and the parents are still mentoring our team. And that way they maintain a connection with their kids that come back. So that's sort of unusual, I guess, in a way, but we're sort of how it's working. But once they are in relationship with the team, they are welcome to join our Slack channel and Discord channels. So they can be in communication, even if they're not mentors afterwards. I mean, after the year, they are invited to stay in the communication channels for our team.
I think we, especially this year with kind of task force media, we've been using social media and like the YouTube a little bit more to like have things that, you know, our wider like parents and alumni would be interested in. So it's not like introductory content where you're like learning about KnightKrawler, but it's like, you know, things, recaps of how competitions went and like, you know, posting on how things are going. And, you know, at 10,000 Lakes, the fact that it was at the U was really convenient because we had a bunch of alumni who are U of M students. And so we were like, absolutely, come sit with us in the stands. Like you can meet, you know, the people. Sometimes it's like more recent graduates, like people I knew, you know, they're in college now. And, you know, it's cool to see them, but also like people who graduated, you know, 2018, 2017, 2016. So like, I don't know them, but they're still alumni and they're still coming to like, come back and see how things are doing. And it's cool to meet them. And so I think inviting them to engage that way. Also, they can help with our week 0. So we have parents do a majority of the construction for the week 0 event, but alumni are also welcome to help. We had our team captain from last year and a team captain from 2 years ago. They came back this year and helped construct stuff for week 0 while students were working on the robot. So I think like for us, it's like inviting them into those things and just like publicly telling everybody how we're doing so that they see it. But I think a lot of it communications wise is also, especially for more recent alumni, is just like personal connections. And so I don't know if the team actually has a list of information. That's kind of something that I think we're looking to build. But it's more you stay in contact with people that are on the team, and then, you know, maybe that person graduates, but their little brother or little sister is now on the team. So like people still have these like indirect connections and they stay updated through that.
I have a totally different question that's like on the topic of team culture, but it's completely unrelated to what we've been discussing. Does anybody else want to say something else about alums? Okay.
I think you should go, Phoebe.
Okay. So something that I think is actually like we maybe sometimes forget on our team, but that is I think fairly relevant to our team culture actually, is that we have an application process. Like I feel like it happens in the fall and then we kind of forget about it. And then we come back to it and we're like, oh yeah, we do that. But we didn't used to. I think that it started actually maybe in the fall of 2019. But it could have been in fall of 2018. I'm not sure. And then we don't necessarily admit every student that applies to the team. And from what talking with other teams, that's somewhat unusual. And there's two pieces to that. One is making sure that our team is actually adequately able to support the number of students we have. And at least from where we stand right now, we don't feel like we can support a lot more than 30 students. And in the past, when we have had bigger team sizes, that there ended up being a lot of students who were struggling to engage, that we didn't have enough mentor support to help them engage, and then they were distracting other students, and then everybody on the team was having like kind of a lower quality of experience because we couldn't effectively support everyone. So that's one piece, is the numbers, and another piece is making sure that each student who joins the team is like ready to commit to the team and kind of has a certain level of maturity, I guess, as well. I'm not actually involved in making the final decision. That's a mentor call. But I've talked with a lot of people about our application process over the years. And the other piece of making the application process work, like just having it, helps sort of make sure that the students who apply are fairly interested. So our process is that students need to come to and experience the team night, which is one of our regular practices, which means it's a 4-hour event. They need to come from 4:30 to 8:30. And they rotate through our different sub-teams. They get a little bit of experience in each one. They come to like an info session, which has been with me for the last 2 years, where I talk about, how to actually finalize their application and like what is the actual requirements of the team? What's the time commitment? What are the competitions like? I show them a video of a match, whatever, right? All the stuff you don't get in the sub-teams. And then students need to fill out a written application where it's simultaneously a bunch of like demographic information and like contact information and stuff that we'll never ever get every single person on the team to fill out a form again. Like we try, but that is the only time where we get everyone to fill out a form. And it's also, like agreeing to core values and saying what they would be most interested in, what sub-team would they like to be on, everything like that. And then they have to sign up for an interview. And so then they do an interview with 2 mentors and they talk to them about like, how did the experience the team night go? And what are they interested in and excited about, as well as after the experience the team nights, all of the captains provide feedback to the mentors on how did each student do during the experience the team night. And then the mentors take all of that information and make the final call on what the team looks like. And so last year, we accepted all but 1 student, and I don't know the details of the situation of the student that we didn't accept, but I do happen to know that happened. And I presume that the mentors decided like this, they said like you could try again next year, but it doesn't seem like you're going to be a good fit for the team right now. Because whatever like the behavior was, the experience team night or whatever. This year we had like 45 applicants and we could only accept around 30 people. And so I think that was a much harder call. I don't honestly know how the mentors did it. But we still knew like we couldn't accept everyone or it was going to be a really, really hard season. And so there was obviously looking at all of that information. There's also looking at, I presume, like how can we have a good balance of who's on the team. We also like accept people to specific sub-teams, which is maybe also interesting. And then we end up with the team. And that's our whole process. But I think like what's interesting about it is that I think that actually does inform a lot of our team culture. In that people need to make a pretty significant like commitment in order to join the team, to say like, I'm going to come to this 4-hour practice. I'm going to fill out this whole application. I'm going to go to an interview. And then it also is relevant to our team culture in terms of that idea that we only have a certain number of students and we are trying to make sure that each student is ready to join before they join. Anyways, I don't know if anybody else does anything like that, but I think I thought it was interesting, maybe relevant, maybe interesting to other people.
I find that an extremely interesting way of running. I mean, we try and get as many people as we can and hope we don't have attrition. So that what's really key and what you came up with is, I think this also has to do with Paul brought up last week. How do you get kids to commit to stay on to the team? And I think you've got one way. Do other teams have other ways they have figured out how to get kids to commit?
This year was, so in the past, especially pre-COVID, we struggled with students who would only maybe show up, 1 day a week, or show up for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours a week, or quit after week 2 of the build season, which had been, something we have historically struggled with. Another interesting thing about Mounds Park Academy is that our school has a no-cut policy. So anybody who wants to be on the team at any point in the season is let onto the team. Something we tried this year was at the beginning of build season, we had before you could step into the lab during build season, everybody went and got this form that they brought home where they checked off, I'm going to show up these days that we're holding lab hours. Like, I'm going to show up Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Or I'm going to show up Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And students were encouraged to attend at least 3 or 4 days. And so they would, check off all of those days that they were planning to attend. And then they would also get their parents signing it. So by the act of, getting their parents signing off on it, it almost helped, because that, when a parent signs off on it, it means, the parents are informed that this is a commitment that, they're making. And that seemed to help, a lot. People didn't always necessarily stick to those schedules that people, that they filled in, but it definitely was a lot better than previous years of, we generally knew who was going to be showing up and on what days, and people for the most part followed it. And I think that, personally, getting those parent signatures, helped a lot in that entire process of the parent's signature kind of signaling that this is a commitment. This isn't just something that, you fill and turn in 5 minutes without thinking about it.
Yeah. On KnightKrawler, so previously we would have like an info night, which is anybody can show up, come see what the team is all about. And then later in the season, we would have what we called a commitment night, where activities fees were due. There was a bunch of paperwork that people had to fill out. Because of Turtle Test, we moved those together. So on the plus side, more paperwork got done from the beginning. The downside was that we had like 50 people on our roster in the fall. And now we have much less than that. I think it's hovering in the high 30s. And so that's been kind of interesting. And I think for us, it's really students kind of self-select, especially during the preseason. Like, students will come to info night and commitment night, and they'll sign up and fill things out. And generally the ones who really want to be here will end up, coming to all of our meetings. And the ones who, are more interested in doing marching band will go do marching band. Sometimes that does mean we have to email them and ask, are you ever coming back? But, it's usually pretty clear. And then, as for commitment, it actually starts in the preseason. So we have the point system, which we've talked a little bit about in other meetings. But essentially a point is 2 to 3 hours of productive work. So students have to get 10 points in order to travel with the team, to go to competition. And then they have to get 20 points to like varsity letter. And so again, that's usually students who really want to come and travel with us will be at enough meetings where they are, because 10 points is extremely reasonable. During build season, we meet Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 hours on Monday and Friday, 2 hours on Wednesday. And then on Saturday, we are there from, the official meeting time is like 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. And generally people will be there after 4 p.m. So any student who wants to get 10 points can very easily get 10 points, even if they don't attend all 4 meetings. And we usually have optional meetings too. So I think for us, we're very much more like, if students want to do these things, they will self-select and decide to do them. But I understand that that is also kind of a privilege of having a large team and having, 30 some students who can accomplish tasks. And for teams that are on the smaller side, that's much more of a problem.
One of the things that KnightKrawler has been discussing sort of informally, and it might be me mostly discussing with other mentors, is with the cost of attending champs this year hovering in the $40,000 range, we're evaluating whether we can even continue to offer champs trip to all students. And then that naturally leads into this idea of, do we just need a smaller team? To Phoebe's point, everything gets easier and more cohesive when you have a smaller group. The idea of cutting students always pushes into our equity initiatives. Some students can't be there every night because they can't get a ride. Some students have to have a job because they have to help support their family. And so anything that we do that pushes people out of participating because they don't have enough points or they're not able to attend up meetings runs up against our equity initiative. So it's a really tricky balance for us. By the way, we started with 53 students on the roster this year. We had an unusually high amount of attrition. We usually lose 5 to 10%. So 2 to 3 students is usually what we end up losing in a year who aren't with the team at the end of the year. And this year, we had a whole group decide to exit together. And so we dropped a lot lower than we typically drop. But it's tough. I mean, it's a really tricky thing to do. KnightKrawler has been struggling with mentor attendance because so many of our hardcore members that have been around for a long time are having kids. We just have people who have different jobs and just can't participate. And so, mentors is an issue. Space has always been an issue. Finding enough work for everyone's always an issue. But we want to make sure that we're inclusive. So it's a tricky thing to figure out, and we don't have the answers to that yet. Yeah, even for our own team.
Well, Talon, this year we trying to find some way to get do some things very similar to KnightKrawlers. What we looked at was, our first trip was Duluth, and we said, okay, if you put in so many hours, we will basically pay for your trip to Duluth, other than we would give so much towards the trip. So students still had to come up with some money. Students who did not have enough hours would have to pay the whole. It wasn't that they weren't invited. It was that you now have to pay for all the travel, all the expenses that we would normally pay for. Then we went up and said similar things for Worlds. It's a moot point now, but because we're not going, but it was, you have to have X amount of hours committed to the team, not only build, because everybody wants to do build, you also have to have X amount of hours in marketing as well. And then we will give so much more subsidy to those who meet these requirements, but we at no time would say you can't come. Similar things, if you want a letter, that is an extreme amount of hours that you have to put in. And also, you can't miss a team meeting unless you have some real excuse. You have to do leadership of something. There was a lot more requirements, but again, we know those students that going to letter are very committed to the team, and I think probably very similar to you, but I think we have a lot of parallels in ways, but what we're doing is not discounting that you can come, but Otherwise, you have to pay your whole way.
Do you have students like fundraising to do that? Like what? I guess I'm curious about that because on our team we've focused a lot on thinking about like fees as an equity thing, and so we have fees for all of our competitions and for joining the team, but they're all sliding scale, and we haven't ever like made the amount you have to pay, somehow dependent on other stuff. But I also know that other teams have more of like students doing their own fundraising, whereas on our team the expectation is more of like a family is going to pay a fee, and if it doesn't work for them, we'll do something.
Right.
Different.
We this is the scheme the captain came up with. We do have scholarships. If there is some reason that a student can't afford, then we would come up with a scholarship. If you are not committed to the team, then we're not going to cover that. But if you're committed, but there are some financial problems, we definitely would cover that as a scholarship.
Yeah.
Scott,
I'll jump on a little perspective from where we're at, but none of our students on either of our teams pay for anything, period. They don't pay for uniforms, they don't pay for travel, they don't pay to go to events, they don't pay for food, they don't pay for anything. And that's the way our school operates. So there's a wide disparity there amongst different.
We just would, there's no way our funds would ever cover between our trips to Duluth and other tournaments and worlds. It's just, from a practicality, we don't have that kind of money. So,
Jesse, didn't you tell us a couple weeks ago that you only take 6 students from each team to competition? Is that right?
No, we typically take like a total of 18 students between the teams, but our teams are small. We're a tiny little school.
Okay.
But that's pending their academic eligibility and other things. And so sometimes it is less.
right. I mean, our team, I think we probably started out over 50 students also. I believe we took around 26 students to Duluth this year. I'm not sure if most of them probably did meet their hours. But we've got a large team. So
And I'll add to it a little bit. I agree with you, Eric, on the hours thing. The way we typically do it is our top 4-hour gears from each team go through a matrix with the mentors, and then we decide who's going to participate in the regionals out of that group, because we do have a limited supply of funds to get them out there. So, but yeah, that's a great way of doing it. Is people that show their commitment get the opportunity.
I think I mentioned this.
A time tracker program that kids can submit their hours, where we keep a little eye that they're not sitting in a corner of the room doing homework. We sort of know that, but kids are supposed to keep track of their own hours, and that all fits into a spreadsheet that we can then analyze later.
I think I've mentioned this on more than a few calls, but equity has been a big focus for our team since 2020. And we do use the point system to determine whether they're eligible to travel, but we recently made all travel fees optional. It also forced us to restructure our fundraising as well, because we used to hold fundraising events where students would have to sell so many tickets, but we all know what happens is that the families end up buying most of those tickets, or extended families. And if you are in need of financial support and you're in need of fundraising, pulling money out of the families for tickets doesn't make any sense. And so all of our fundraising has been restructured so that we we do it as group fundraising, and if students show up to participate, that's great and we appreciate it. But it's not a requirement of anyone to participate in fundraising either. It's worked out okay. We didn't get a great percentage of our families that contributed to our trip to Duluth. It was about half of our families participated in making a donation to cover Duluth travel, but we had an exceptionally high rate of families who participated to make a contribution to Champs travel. But in the end, we're only expecting, even if we got everyone to participate, we'd only collect 10-20% of our total travel costs from families, because we don't charge a fee that's relative to the total cost of the trip.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why we had, like, honestly, part of the reason why we had higher for Champs is that you stood up there and talked about the budget, Scott. Like, I mean, not that you didn't talk about the budget with Duluth, but you had slides, you know, and there was much more information on what, like, why we ask this, but also why it is optional. So, I don't know. I think in the same way that I feel like we can always communicate more to our volunteers and everything, I think that people always want to know why that you do things a certain way. And so I think just telling everybody at the travel meeting, like, hey, this is why we do this. And, you know, like, your ability or inability to contribute, you know, doesn't matter as much. But when you do contribute, you know, it means a lot to us. And, like, it actually helps and makes a dent, you know.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's really helpful to see, like, what exactly the money that you raised for, specifically for Champs, what the money that you give to the team and what all of that money is going towards. Because I know, especially for Champs, there's so many different aspects. There's food, there's travel, there's a much higher competition registration fee than there is for regionals. And I think, maybe there's not. You know, there's, I think it's really helpful for our families and I know one of our mentors created a presentation to give to the captain's team. It was really helpful to me to see, like, oh yeah, like, this is a lot of money, but we're raising all this money because, you know, we're trying to provide the best possible experience for the students that are going on this trip. I think that would be really helpful for our families and parents and communities.
I think something that's interesting is that I'm, like, hearing is a lot of you have different ways to figure out who travels. We try pretty hard to bring everyone. It's almost like, you know, we're doing that screening at the application process at the beginning, and a lot of you are doing it more towards, like, who travels, which is interesting. I've had this conversation with our mentors several times. There are 29 students who could potentially go to Worlds, and I've been really committed to getting all of them, and there have been so many conversations with people have been like, somebody is going to drop at the last minute, and I'm like, I don't think so. So we'll see what happens on Tuesday if everyone gets on the bus. But yeah.
Well, we had to handle Worlds last year, and we mostly subsidized every student that was there. I mean, we did have to charge some nominal. The idea was that maybe this might be their only chance to go to Worlds. I mean, we were seeing other teams here that they're more consistently going to Worlds, but if we had a chance for kids and this might be their only year they went, we had to make sure it happened. Unfortunately, it put our team back quite a bit. So we are probably going to take a few years to recover from that. We only found out that we were going to Worlds less than a week before we were accepted, less than a week before Worlds. Now, when that happens, if you can imagine what it costs to fly, and you know, we just dug in and said we're going to do it. But yeah, it's tough. So we've got to make some more choices in the future so that our team can exist year to year.
Well, we're at the 8:30 mark. Does anybody have any final team culture stuff that they want to bring up or comments they want to make?
Joseph, of course it's us. We always have things to say about team culture. I have a brief comment, but because I sort of thought I would talk about this and I didn't talk about it more, but something that's important to me regarding team culture, like a big notable thing for our team, is, again, this is totally different track, but kind of goes back to the like role models and leadership and how are people acting and gracious professionalism and all that. And in 2020, when I joined the team, there was like a lot of inappropriate conversation, a lot of uncomfortable humor. Things were weird. Our team dinners were really weird. Like it's not a great moment. There were a lot of good things about that team, but that particular thing was really hard. And something that that we did to try to change that when we came back in person, that was kind of hard, but I was really pushing for it, is I was like, I need us to have mentors at dinner with us. And it had been like, for a while, mentors would always go off into a separate room and eat dinner, and then the students would all eat dinner. And it created like an ripe ecosystem for whatever was happening with the students to just like exist, and there was no mentor supervision. And so that was a hard thing to ask for, because the mentors were like, we need this time to like talk with each other and be, hear about each other's days and like enjoy being mentors. And I was like, but the team needs you here right now. And so for the first few months of the year last year, we did like have like mentors spread out at every table. We also talked about it with captains, and we talked about the norms, and it seemed to really help to reset in that way. And we've had a lot fewer issues with that since then. And talking about it and saying this issue and like talking about it with the captains has also helped. Like I hear other students say, hey, like you can't, like, don't make a comment like that. That's not comfortable. Like we could still do better at it. But I think that having a reset was really key for us. And that's also, I've said this before, but part of that was the pandemic, and a bunch of the students who are really doing it graduated. And I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been in that, hadn't had that change. But I think it's interesting, like, I don't know, it's possible to change something that is uncomfortable. And that's like another piece of culture. It's not the like lovely, happy part of like, oh, we're baking beautiful core values, but sometimes you have like a negative input and you have to figure out how to deal with it. And it's possible to deal with it. And I feel so much like safer on our team now than I did when I was in 9th grade. And so, yeah, I could talk a lot more to that, but come find me sometime and I will talk your ears off about it.
I always enjoy hearing about your culture change. And I think that's a great story. And I hope you keep telling that even after you're out of robotics and on to your next adventure. Anyone else have any final wrap-up stuff?
Well, Scott, just, or other people, what is our subject next week?
So that was going to be my next question. First of all, I don't think we should probably have a topic next week. I don't think KnightKrawler will be conscious after the 22-hour bus ride back. And I don't know what the other teams who are on the call who are going to champs feel like, but next week might be a good week to skip. Is there any objection to that? Okay. I'll send out an email reminder later in the week to remind folks that we're not meeting on Saturday or Sunday next week. And then the topics that were suggested the last time we had a call for future meetings was how do we make Minnesota better? And another topic was ideas for summer events, or just talking about what teams do in the summer. So I'm happy to do either one of those, or if someone has this discussion for something else for 2 weeks from tonight.
On the topic of making Minnesota better, and this is kind of a question for Ian and Phoebe. Do you think if we did that, we can have the students who are talking about the student board also come in and talk about that?
Yeah. And
Okay.
Something I would like to preface, I guess. Something that's kind of happening behind the scenes in preparation for that meeting is there are a few leaders from across the state. I think right now we are aiming to get one student leader from every section as defined by MNSHL. Right now we have 6 of those 8 leaders decided. And Lexi, Phoebe, and I are part of that, where we're trying to organize a board that is to improve first in Minnesota. And I would ask that we have that meeting not in 2 weeks, because I will not be there, because I will be on an airplane flying home from Quiz Bowl Small School Nationals. And I know Dominic is really excited about that. He was on a different Quiz Bowl team that we were friends from that for a while, but so I will not be.
Okay, so that's on April 30th that you do not want the meeting to happen. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so can I put you guys down for May 7th, and can I just turn the entire agenda over to you guys for that night?
That would be.
Sure.
That would be great.
So then on May 7th, we will plan to talk about your guys' behind the scenes stuff and whatever agenda you guys want to have for ideas you have for making Minnesota First better. Fantastic. Let's do it. I'm all in favor of not having to plan. So then for April 30th, do we want to talk about what teams do for summer events, or do we want to do something different?
I think generally like summer and off-season stuff would be cool. I know that I currently have a list that's like 30 items long of things I want to improve this summer. So I'm curious to hear what other people are thinking about.
All right. So tentatively, let's put that on the calendar for the 30th. We're not going to meet between now and then, so I don't know what would come up there. A topic that has been of interest to me lately is that I feel like we on KnightKrawler need to do a better job of sharing our legacy with students. This came up because Lexi won Dean's List here, and a bunch of students turned around to me in the stands and said, "Is that our second Dean's List winner?" Because they know my daughter who won Dean's List as well, and I had to say, no, that's our 5th. And I think we don't do a very good job of sharing the history of the team and the legacy of the team. And I was thinking of ways that we can try to help our students better understand the history of the team and what it means to be part of KnightKrawler, just not the core values that we talk about every day, but that legacy. And I feel like it might even help us get back some more alumni mentors. You know, when you feel like you're part of something bigger, it might bring people back. So that I'm going to put that out there as something that maybe we could talk about down the road in terms of how do you introduce your team members to the history of the team, or how do you build that sense of legacy? It almost sounds like a fraternity or sorority thing, but how do you build that sense of understanding the history of the team and how you fit into that?
Yeah.
No. I know one topic. I haven't been here for any. This is my first one here. But one topic I'm really interested in. Our school has a greater mythical robotics program with FDC and FLL teams, and I would like to see, like, do other teams have FTC and FLL teams that they mentor, and kind of like how do they maintain that connection of student mentorship throughout the different levels, and make sure that there is like a smooth transition between the 3 different programs.
Or just generally, how do you maintain connections between the different levels? How do you keep your FRC and FTC and FLL teams connected if your team has connections to those teams?
I love that topic. KnightKrawler is exploring the idea of doing some more things than FLL, and so I would be very interested to hear of what other teams are doing in that area. Excellent. All right. Well, this is cool. I mean, there's 4 topics on the list, so we definitely won't be done with these Sunday night calls anytime soon. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lexi, for kicking us off tonight and getting that organized. I appreciate that. I will do my best to get this uploaded to YouTube. Other than tonight, everything's up to date. So if you haven't checked out the playlist on YouTube, there's now 13 videos. This will be number 14. So if you haven't had a chance to go back and look at any of the previous videos, feel free to do that. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
See ya. Bye.